Alright, what's up guys? Welcome to part 3 of the E36 video. I apologize for the delay in videos. I'm waiting on parts still from BMW. They were supposed to come in today and they were going to call me, but I haven't got a call yet and I really want to keep the content rolling. So I'm going to do a little video today on how to relay a fuel pump. And let's see, where's my relay here? I can explain to you guys how this thing works. So if you see, this is a factory BMW relay actually, but most relays that are 4-post are just like this. So if you've never done this, terminal 30 is always from the battery side. So that's just power directly from the battery. So you're gonna have like a pretty big gauge wire on there because you wanna make sure you can flow enough amperage. And then 87 on this post is your output. That's always your output. 85 and 86 are the switch that need to complete a circuit to energize the relay, which then connects 30 to 87 for your output. So it doesn't actually matter if you put power at 85 or 86 and ground at the other one. You just have to have power at one and ground at the other. So if you have a ground trigger, for example, like horns and stuff, when you push the horn button, typically that's a grounding signal. So maybe you would put your ground on 85 and then you would have power from the battery at 86, so that when you give it a ground to this pin, it completes that circuit, which then flips like a little pole in there and basically a switch, and then connects 30 to 87. So relays are a smart way to protect all of your electronics whenever you're wiring anything like a fuel pump or a horn or anything like that. You want to have a relay. You get cleaner power, and the electrical switching of the relay is designed to do that versus just, I don't know, giving constant power to a device. I guess not as good for it. So basically when you're sizing stuff, like for example for a fuel pump, typically they draw about 15 amps max. So you want to make sure that your circuit and everything, let's swap the camera around, we're not looking at anything. So basically when you're sizing a circuit, let's say your fuel pump draw is 15 amps. You want to have a fuse in line just a little bit higher than that, so that basically it won't trip under normal usage. So like let's say a 20 amp fuse. And then you want to size the wiring to hold more than 20 amps because you want the fuse to always blow before the wiring burns up. Obviously, you don't want to start a fire. So when you're sizing circuits, you need to kind of think a little bit backwards of, all right, what's the device I'm wiring in? How big of a relay do I need? You know, if it's a really big fuel pump or something that draws, let's say 25 amps, you probably want like a 40 amp relay rather than 30, just to have a little bit of extra safety margin. And then you're going to size the gauge of the wire accordingly to be able to handle 40 full amps or more. You need to essentially really think about your electrical stuff that way, because if you put too small of a wire somewhere, you could end up burning your car to the ground on accident, and you really don't want to do that, obviously. So I'm going to put a 40 amp relay in for the fuel pump, which is pretty common. They're commonly available at basically any parts store. Lots of relays are 40 amp. And then I'll run a 20 amp fuse in line. And that way, if the fuel pump does fail completely and tries to draw a ridiculous amount of amperage, it will just pop the fuse and not burn up wiring or anything else, or the car. So hopefully that helps understand a little bit about sizing electronics. We're going to go ahead and get into wiring it up now. So pretty much on E36s, all you have to do, let's see, this one is the fuel level sender, and this one is the pump power. And I just know that because I remember, and also you can also see the gauge of the wires, or the thickness of the wires is a little bit larger on this one. So you would be more inclined to believe this is like an electrical device running rather than just a sensor or something measuring resistance like this one. See how thin those are? So that's kind of a good clue if you're not familiar with that stuff. And then on E36s, the power wire is this one, the green with purple tracer. So basically what we're gonna do there is cut this wire and a little bit farther back so we have more length to work with. I'm gonna take all this factory electrical tape off. But basically this is gonna be our trigger for the relay. So that will connect to pin 85 or 86, depending on what I choose. but I can't remember the convention. Like one of them's typically ground and the other one's power, but it really doesn't matter. Like I said, you just have to complete this circuit. So I'll probably, you know, wire that purple or green with purple tracer to 86 and then ground 85 to the body somewhere. That way when I key on and the pump tries to prime with the factory ECU sending that power, it's going to energize this relay, and then I will have battery power hooked up to 30 there, and then we'll go out 87. Then we'll have nice clean power with a large gauge wire directly from the battery in the trunk, rather than coming all the way from the ECU back under the floor through tiny little wire designed for 200 horsepower. We want to make 500 horsepower, not 200. So you need to upgrade the wiring to do that. And basically, when you external relay a fuel pump like this, when you just add an additional relay and increase the gauge of the wiring going to the pump, you're just basically increasing the horsepower limit and trying to prevent fuel pressure drop at high RPMs and high loads. So we'll get into that in just a second. Alright, so we got the new tank seal. Here's the little piece that just goes in here. So you gotta pull this out, drop the seal in, and then put it back in, then put the little ring on top. Alright, I finally got all that back in. I forgot how much of a pain that seal is. The trick is to put it down in the tank slightly and then install the pump afterwards. So got that in. The plastic ring was giving me a little bit of trouble. I found out the one I was trying to use was warped or bent or something, this one. So I had another one in the garage and it went on immediately, so go figure. Now I'm gonna hook up the fuel lines, put some clamps on, and then plug the pump in, and then I'll go put the MAF and everything on so we can see if this thing runs. Alright, got the lines hooked back up, clamps on. The ring is tight, but I'm gonna go ahead and whack it with a hammer and straight blade. Basically just hit those little flats right there and it rotates around to snug it up a little more. I've got to, oh, there's the fuel pump connector and there's, okay, so I've got to plug that in. I'm going to relay the pump also, which I'll talk about in probably another segment of this video, but for now we're not going to worry about that. And that only has to do with the wiring out here anyway, so nothing inside. Alrighty, I got the new aluminum shifter bushings installed. The factory bushing that tensions the throttle is like a little plastic insert inside a rubber bushing, and when they fail, you can't just get that piece, you have to get an entirely new cable. So rather than buy 2 new cables, I just bought these aftermarket aluminum bushings off eBay, and they just use a little snap ring right there to lock in, and then they're threaded so you have your adjustment with the cable threading into that. So yeah, got those installed, fairly straightforward. Got a bunch more pieces and intake boot and some other stuff. Right now I'm kind of having a little bit of a debate. I was just going to delete the ASC traction control throttle body thing, and so I got a non-ASC boot, but now I'm realizing that these little adapter stuff in here, I don't have like all the little plastic pieces. I think they're slightly different size for the idle air control valve, and this one I'm not even sure what it is. But if you look on the ASC throttle body, there's a barb fitting that I think this goes to. So given that I'm going to go turbo with this car anyway, and all of that's going to be deleted pretty shortly, I'm kind of debating just returning this, put the ASC stuff back on, and drive it completely bone stock like that just for a little bit until I go ahead and go turbo. So I think I'm probably going to do that, and that way I don't have to deal with buying even more fittings and adapters and stuff that I'm not going to use eventually. So I got a bunch of goodies from BMW just for related to the clutch stuff. A couple grommets, there's a return spring, and then there's a compression spring in here somewhere. Got a hose for the brake fluid, or clutch fluid, whatever. Pivot point thing, a little clip. Don't remember what that was for. Oh, there's the other spring. And then I've got these clips too. In the last video I wasn't able to install all the ones that go up there, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw those in since I have them now. Alright, what's up dudes? Welcome back to the Sedan Build. Apologize for the delay. I've been like waiting on parts and all sorts of stuff. I was relaying the fuel pump the other day, and I realized the relay I had, the receptacle like inside the pins were bent, so I wasn't able to push the relay into the receptacle. So went and got another relay at the parts store earlier, and I'm gonna pull the carpet out from inside here. This is like some sound system crap that the guy had that's poorly done, but I'm gonna basically pull the interior out of here, all this crap out, pull this carpet back, and install the relay for the fuel pump behind the carpet so you can't see it. And let's see what else. I've got another few parts in. I realized I wasted a little bit of money on the intake boot because I had the traction control throttle body one that was like a weird different boot right here, and I basically bought the non-traction control throttle body one, and it turns out it's the wrong boot anyway. So I'm gonna see if I can return that from BMW or to BMW, and then I to replace that got what's in this box, which is a Maximum PSI boost proof ICV kit, and I also opted for their 3-inch silicone elbow that goes to the throttle body. So let's unbox that and take a look. Okay, so here we have the Maximum PSI boost proof ICV kit, and this is the optional 3-inch silicone elbow. So this goes from 2.75 inches at the throttle body to 3 inches on the intercooler side, and then it has a provision for the ICV, the idle air control valve. And then this piece replaces the factory hose, which is referred to as the turkey neck on the factory one. Those typically split all the time, especially under boost, so I'm just preparing for boost, and this is high quality stuff. You can see it. There's a bunch of layers, and it's good stuff. So I'm not sponsored by Maximum PSI at all. I just think that they make really good products for the community for these cars. So I highly recommend you get that set up. To see the turkey neck I'm talking about, see if you can see under the manifold here. So right back there, that hose goes into the intake manifold right there, and then down to the idle air control valve, which is a little cylinder right here, my finger's on it, and then it goes out of there over to this hose. So this is the factory one that's going to come out and be replaced, and it's actually split a little bit anyway, so we'll swap that out. I've also got those throttle bushings on that I talked about in another clip, but I haven't adjusted the pedal yet because I need a second person to do that, so I'll get some assistance for that. And then, so I'm gonna install those pieces, then put the MAF on, and finish the fuel pump relaying in the back, and then we should be able to just fire this thing up. So I was poking around under the manifold here, and I found a couple of pieces of split hose. I'll have to see what those even go to. It may be charcoal canister related stuff, because it's a really small line. Also, I noticed the knock sensors. If you look way back there, that bolt, it's kind of hard to see, right there. I can't really put my finger on it because I'm in the foreground here, but that knock sensor is cracked and split up, and most likely the other one is too. So that's probably going to cause an issue or give a code. I'll go ahead and order a pair of them. And let's see what else we find. Alright, now I pretty much need to remove the ICV. So I've pulled the turkey neck hose off of the intake manifold. There's actually no clamp on it. I don't know if there is one factory, if it's just missing. There is a clamp on this one, but I can't get to that side of it. So I'm just gonna have to pull the ICV out of the holder. I also need to pull off this electrical connection. So I'll do that. See if I can get in there. Come on. Clip's weird. It's like stuck. There we go. Oh, it's just dirty. Okay. Now it's in like a rubber grommet thing, which I think I can just push it out the end, but I can't really remember. So I'm gonna wiggle that out, and this other hose here that's attached to it, you can see it moving around, and then we'll get those nice new pieces for Maximum PSI on. Out of here. The other hose may be stuck on stuff. This is one area of E36s that is a major pain in the ass. Everyone kind of hates working under the intake manifold because there's just a whole lot of shit under it. And it's exceptionally hard to work with only one hand while I'm trying to film with the other one. There we go. Come on, bitch. Get out of here. Come on down. Oh, there's got to be an easier way to do this. Still can't get to that clamp. All right, I'm basically just wiggling that out, so I'm gonna stop filming for now. Success. Got it out. So this is the factory idle air control valve. Basically what it does, for those of you that don't know, it basically lets air come from this intake pipe, bypassing the throttle body to get into the intake manifold to let the engine idle, and it just essentially constantly like opens and closes that valve to, based on engine conditions and throttle and all that, to make the engine idle well. If you delete that, you with factory strategies or with factory ECU, it doesn't work too well. If you have like a map sensor car or something like that, you can kind of get away with deleting those, but since we're going stock ECU with RK tunes, it's much easier to just keep this thing and use these nice new parts on it. So also, there's like a ball valve inside of these things, and when you shake it back and forth, you should hear a ball kind of like clattering around in there. If you don't, it's probably stuck, and I just shook this one a second ago. Can't really hear anything, so I'm going to take the hoses off, which I have to anyway to replace them, and then we'll spray some brake cleaner in there and see if we can get it freed up. I'm going to be able to hear this, but I'm going to try to shake it right next to the mic. So if you hear that faint rattling, that's the valve actually operating correctly. I'm still going to spray some brake cleaner in there and try to clean it out a little bit, just because everything's dirty on this car. You can see my hands are filthy already. So when you're reinstalling these, there's a flow arrow. So it's going to go flow from the intercooler pipe to the turkey neck side. So that guy will go there, and that guy will go there, and then that'll go to the elbow here with the included piece. Oh, I just realized I'm doing that whole thing sideways. I'm so sorry, guys. Alright, so I brake cleaned it out, and if you look in here, I don't know if you can see that, probably won't focus that deep in there, but there's a little valve or a piece that moves in there. So if you rotate it quickly, hear how loud that is now? It's nice and freed up. That's what you want. So it's not going to focus in there, but there's a little piece in there that moves. You'll see it's a metal piece. It's kind of shiny there. Good. Let's reinstall. Oh, come on. There. Can't end a clip with no focus. Alright, so on the reinstallation, I just have the turkey neck side on with the clamps. I'm going to try to put it back in there and then snake it into the grommet and then get that side connected, and then we'll hook up the lower side after the fact, since it's a little bit much to navigate in this tiny little crowded space. So let's do it. Oh, starting to get some rain. Cool. Alright, I've got the ICV pretty much back in its location. It's in the grommet. Need to hook up the electrical. One other thing I wanted to talk about though, since this is such a common failure point, and I highly recommend you go ahead and do this kit if you're turboing one of these. The other thing is, this is the plastic fitting that goes in the manifold. Well, it just has a little clip down here. But you see how much I can move this thing? Like basically the boost is going to push this out, and I think it's just in there with an O-ring. So there's a couple of companies that make some like provision to latch into the bottom of the manifold. So before this thing actually does go turbo, I'm going to be pulling this turkey neck part back off and pulling this fitting out. I think I already ordered it, but I'm going to have to go check my emails to make sure, and I'll show which one I got. It's the same one that Jason Scott uses, and it's a nice little hooked clip basically underneath, so it just can't blow out during boost. So got this back in place. I'm going to hook that upper connection on, hook up the wiring, and then the other hose that goes over to the throttle body area. So let's do it. Snaked in there. Let's take a look. Yep, looks like it's all the way seated, and then it comes up and out through right here in between those throttle body coolant lines. And we'll put our fitting on. Elbow. So this will go like that, fitting underneath. It's not even close to right. So I'm having a little bit of an issue getting the clamp square on the ICV. It keeps trying to fall down and like get a little bit crooked. So I'm going to remove this intake manifold support bracket. I think it's a 10 millimeter right here, and then a 13 mil down there on the block. And that will give me a little bit more access in this area to get in there and get that squared up. So I'll do that right now. Alright, so I took the 10 millimeter off the manifold and just loosened the 13 on the block, so I was able to rotate down the bracket. And that gave me a whole bunch more room and visibility here. Lifting this coolant line also helped get out of the way, so now I can see the clamp and make sure it's seated all the way and get it tightened all the way up. Alright, I was able to get the clamp nice and square and tightened all the way up, so I'm happy with that. Coolant line's back in its little clip there, everything's back in place. Now I can go ahead and put this bracket back, this intake manifold bracket, I'll rotate it back up and hook it there. And then we're going to go ahead and put this little piece with a clamp in that line. That's the new line from Maximum PSI. And that will hook with another clamp to right here. So, and then we'll put the throttle body on. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of that and put the MAF on. And then we'll be close to starting. Alright, we've got the boot on, the throttle body with the clamp. The lower line to the ICV is hooked up. I recommend go ahead and getting that hooked up before you put it on the throttle body. There's enough slack in the line that you can just kind of do it out here and then slide it down into place. Oops, got myself, I guess. Now I've got to put the MAF on. Man, there's a gnat right in my face. It's so annoying. And they show you the flow direction, so it goes that way. Plug, I think, typically goes on the bottom side. I can't really remember. This is just a temporary measure to get the car running. Obviously, this MAF will be changed out when we go turbo. We're going to go with an RK Tunes digital MAF, which is programmable for a lot more horsepower. So we'll put that on now, and then I'm going to go finish up the fuel pump relay stuff next. Everything's reassembled. I can't remember the exact clocking of stock MAF. Like, I don't remember on these early models, like if it should be at 3 o'clock like that, or not 3 o'clock, 1:30 or whatever. Or down here it doesn't really fit, and over here's kind of also weird, so we're going with that for now. I tilted the intake manifold bracket back into place, hooked that back up with the 10 there, and tightened the one on the block. Let's see what else. These are on and tight. The ICV is tight. I'm going to check the oil, just make sure it has oil. And then we're also going to deal with the fuel pump real quick. So I ran the wires for the relay. Let's get okay. So initially I was trying to do this relay, which is a nice sealed unit, and it has a separate plug here. Not really a good way to mount it in the trunk because I don't have a bracketing system that latches into that. But one of these tabs, let's see, which one is it? This one here at the top. See how it's crushed in like that? That's what's basically halted me for a little bit, because I was dealing with having to just go get another relay. So the pump's already relayed. It's back in there, everything's hooked up. I have this cover still off just so I can check for leaks once I turn it on, just to make sure it's not leaking out the tank top. And next up, I'm going to pull everything out of the trunk, pull the carpeting out of this side, and then we're going to mount the new relay. Let's see where to put it. Well, I got a relay that has like a little hole at the top, so it'll be nice, and it can go with just a self-tapper or something into the carpet or behind. I think I'm going to put it behind the carpet. I don't really want you to see it, and I want to be able to like get groceries and stuff. There it is. Just a cheapo little relay with a mounting hole. So there's a 40 amp relay. A typical fuel pump draws 15 amps or less. I'm running a Walbro 255, which I know for sure draws less than 15 amps. So this will be great. I've already sized the wiring. It's 10 gauge, I believe, for more than enough. Relay's more than enough. Now we put a fuse in line, which will be a 20 amp probably. That way if the fuel pump does fail and starts drawing too much current, it'll just pop the fuse. It won't like overheat the relay or burn up any wires or anything. I tried to kind of loom this nicely. I'm gonna tuck it underneath the carpet here when I pull this all up, just so you can't see it at all. And then we'll have, so this is power and ground to the fuel pump and then trigger. So there we go. All right, so I'm making an executive decision right now. I've pulled all the crap out of the trunk, pulled the carpet back, shitty spare. Here's all the what would you call this? System, audio system wiring, I guess, for whatever he had going on there. So I was just tucking that under the carpet too. Started pulling all this back, realizing that the carpet basically gets stuck on these speaker boxes, and there's a bunch more stuff to clean up right now. And if I even pull this back a little bit, there's full sound deadening and everything, and a mess of crap back here, which I probably should go through. This all looks like stuff for the audio that he did. But I'm thinking I'm just gonna sneak the relay in here somewhere externally rather than push it all the way back behind everything, because this is kind of a pain in the ass and I really just want to hear the car run right now. So I'm just trying to kind of get this done in true drifter mentality. So I'll probably just hang the relay like somewhere way up here or something, to where it's not going to get in the way of anything in the trunk. That way I can load a whole bunch of crap in there and it's going to be way up there. So that's the current plan, and we'll go ahead and do that and then fire this bad boy up. Alright, so since I decided not to put the relay behind the carpet, I'm just going to actually put it right down here. That way it'll be completely under the flooring, it'll be protected out of the way, and there's actually already two little holes. You probably can't see it. Let me get the flash. Okay, so there's a factory apparently, or maybe this guy did that, but there's two little holes right here. I'm just gonna enlarge those a little bit and run a zip tie and mount the relay just like right there, which is actually kind of perfect distance for the harness and everything. So not to have too much pressure on it, and then I'll run the power and ground for the relay underneath this panel, so that the trunk stuff can just go right on top of it. So we're gonna do that right now. Alright, flashers are going off because I just rehooked up the battery and it's freaking out for whatever reason. So I think we've got everything pretty much situated. The harness is here, mounted to this plastic piece, which is actually really easy because of those holes I mentioned in a prior clip. Just drill them out a little bit and put a zip tie through them. And that's got a secondary benefit, besides being just easy, of being an isolator there. So that piece of plastic essentially prevents any of these pieces from being able to short out on like the metal frame rail behind it or any other area where I chose to mount it. And I've also electrical taped the ends, just so if they do, for whatever reason, like if the relay falls down and hits the ground down there for some stupid reason, then they won't short out. The connections won't. So we've got the fuse holder in line right here. I tucked it down here. So you always want to put a fuse holder on the 30 terminal of your relay, because you basically want the fuse to pop. If the relay tries to pull more than the amperage you want through that fuse, you want the fuse to pop on the incoming side. So it's actually kind of stuck in here right now. Let's see. It's around the corner of the battery there. There we go. So I can get that out and access it if I pop a fuse or blow a pump or whatever, and then basically have to go check that, but it's kind of just tucked in there. It's a 20 amp fuse. I know the pump's going to draw under 10 amps during normal operation, so if it draws 20 or more, then it'll pop that fuse and that will indicate it's a bad pump. And the relay and all the wiring is rated for around 40 amps, so hopefully the fuse will pop first. So now I don't think I have any more excuses. I have one more excuse before we can start it, and that's I need fuel. I think this thing's completely out. So let me go look and see how much fuel it is. We do have the MAF hooked up, and I think we're pretty much there. Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. There we go. Just gotta cycle the hazards. We have no gauge lighting. What is this? There we go. It says we have a half tank, but I'm pretty dang sure that's wrong. I guess I can try to fire it, but when I saw in there that there was like no fuel in the bucket, so pretty much I think that's wrong, and it just needs to like slosh around a little bit. I'm gonna go grab 5 gallons of 93 from the gas station, and then we'll try this thing. Alrighty, well, I think we're pretty much there. I'm gonna check the oil and make sure there's plenty of oil in the car. I just filled it with 5 gallons of 93. MAF's hooked up, the Maximum PSI stuff's installed. I'm trying to think what I'm missing. TPS is hooked up. Yep. Throttle cables aren't adjusted, but we're just trying to idle right now. Finished relaying the fuel pump, so well, that should be good. I couldn't hear the fuel pump priming. When you key on these things, they should prime for like 2 seconds, I think. 2 or 5 seconds, I can't remember. But also it has all factory sound deadening and everything, so I may just not hear it from the interior being there. Let's give it a shot. Alright, so the car cranks great, sounds like it has compression and everything, but I can't hear the fuel pump coming on, and I feel like I tried to unplugging the MAF and just putting it on limp mode maps, and I feel like that, if I had fuel at all, it would at least pop once, but it was just spinning over with compression. So finding out that this fuse right here, which appears to be quite blown, is the fuel pump fuse. So that's, let's see, 11 through 20. That would be this row, 11 through 20, that would be number 18. And if you look on the schematic here, fuel pump, number 18. So I'm gonna swap that out, and hopefully that's the only issue here. I don't really know why that's blown, but we'll figure it out. All right, I'm just gonna show you guys where we're at, and I'm gonna end this video here because we're not quite there. It's already getting late, and this video is a super long one at this point. So hopefully in a couple days or tomorrow I'll be able to get this thing fired up, but right now it just cranks. Seems like it has no fuel. Cranks fine. Sounds good, but no fuel. Otherwise we'd be getting at least little pops and stuff. The fact that we have a check engine light right there means the DME has power, which is good and normal, and we will revisit this later. Alright you guys, thanks so much for watching that video. I'm sorry we didn't get it started. I really wanted to. We're just gonna have to, you'll have to stay tuned for part 4 to see it start, I guess. If you have any comments, questions about the build or anything, or criticism about the video style, anything to improve, I'd like to hear it. I really appreciate the constructive criticism, and I always want to make the videos as entertaining and as informative as possible. So let me know in the comments below, and thanks so much for watching. See you guys next time in part 4.